I'm Councillor Claudine Russell, the Chairman of the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board, and I'm pleased to welcome you all to this meeting of the Board. The meeting will be broadcast live and recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings? I ask so the people at the meeting will know this is happening. No. So if the fire alarm sounds during the meeting, please remain seated and members of the Democratic Services team will assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. So item 1 on our agenda this evening is apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillors Cooling, Cadker, Prendergast, Councillor Holmes. Do we have any other apologies? No? Might be coming. Okay, at the moment we don't have Councillor Grigg, Hasty or Carter. No. Oh, and Cannon, sorry. And I've been advised that Councillor Parsonal will be leaving at 7:45 this evening. So thank you for that. Item number 2, can I have substitute members, please? Councillor English?
Councillor English for Councillor Cadker.
Okey-doke. Item 3, urgent items, and we don't have any urgent items this evening. Item 4, notification of visiting members. Have we got any visiting members? I see one. Please come to the mic and say which item you'd like to speak on.
Councillor Cleater for item 13 and item 14.
Thank you.
Councillor Spooner, just to listen and observe. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Have we got any disclosures by members or officers? No. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Have we got any disclosures of lobbying? I'll go around the room in this way. Councillor Cooper?
I've been lobbied on item number 13.
Councillor Sands?
I've been lobbied on item 13, Cranbourne Avenue.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Item 13.
Councillor Clark?
Item 13.
Hi, Councillor Hasty. Have you got any disclosures and have you been lobbied on any items?
I'm going to say 13 just because it seems popular and it probably have been.
Thank you. And I've been lobbied on item 13. Oh, Councillor Parfitt-Reid.
Item 13, thank you.
Great. Councillor Cannon, run up and tell us if you've had any, if you've got any disclosures or you've been lobbied on any item before we move on.
I have not been lobbied and I have no disclosures.
Lovely, thank you. Item 7, I move that all items be taken in public. Is this agreed? Agreed. Councillor Parfitt-Reid, I think your mic's still on. Item 8, we've got the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of August. Are there any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? No. So I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 2nd of August 2023 be approved as a correct record and signed. Is that agreed? Item 9 is presentation of petitions, but we don't have any petitions this evening. Item 10 is question and answer session for local residents. We've received 4 questions from members of the public this evening. The total time available for the question and answer session is 30 minutes. I have a couple of questions from members of the public that aren't able to attend, so I'll go through this in order. There's the first question is from Gordon King, and he's not able to attend. He said, and I'm just checking, I have got Barry Stiff on the thing I have. Do KCC have any plans to improve the Plains Avenue Lewes Road junction, as when there's heavy congestion on the Lewes Road, both southbound to Lewes and northbound towards Maidstone, it's very difficult to safely exit Plains Avenue, as you have to cross 3 lanes of traffic to get into the 4th southbound lane to head towards Maidstone, and your view of northbound vehicles aiming to enter Parkway is blocked by stationary southbound traffic. The answer is that KCC are aware of this situation and will continue to monitor the junction. Whilst it is acknowledged that Plains Avenue can be more difficult to turn right from, we believe that the subsequent refreshing of the yellow box marking across the junction on Lewes Road has greatly assisted this manoeuvre. KCC are also considering extending the length of the existing double yellow lines in Plains Avenue, as it has been observed there are existing conflicts with movement into and out of the junction. If this has progressed, this will be advertised as a separate TRO consultation. Thank you for your question. We now have another question from Andrew Hemsley, who is here with us. Please come forward and ask your, oh no, he didn't make it. Oh, okay. I'll move on and come back, he's not here. So the next one is from Simon Moore, who's not able to attend. It's with a great level of concern, frustration, amusement, anger, and inability to comprehend the ever-continuing and growing use of the High Street, King Street, and Pudding Lane by cars and motorcycles, when signage clearly states that these are pedestrian zones. I walk into town frequently and have to increasingly avoid vehicles when I cross these roads. There is no deterrent and no police present to stop and fine the drivers who continue to repeatedly flaunt the law and pay scant regard to the erected signage at the entrance to each road. I cannot remember how long this restriction has been in situ, but certainly a very long time. I've spoken with civil enforcement officers who have said that they cannot do anything within their powers, only stationary vehicles, and that the police only tend to monitor the abuse of this prohibited driving area on a Friday and Saturday evening. Adding, people use it as a cut-through rat run to avoid using the traffic lights and one-way system. It's therefore quite basically a farce having the signage and restrictions in place if drivers are going to simply ignore them, in knowing that there's to be no penalty enforced. How long is it therefore going to take KCC to get round to making a decision to install ANPR cameras and so automatically fine these drivers who abuse these restrictions and enter the pedestrian zones? It's been implemented and put to good use in other Kent towns, so why not Maidstone? The answer is the County Council have been made aware of unauthorised vehicles contravening these restrictions and are undertaking assessment to see if the site would be suitable for camera enforcement. Camera enforcement for these type of road restrictions has been heavily regulated by national government, and we are required to follow all of the regulatory steps before we could implement enforcement. As the report to the JTP that we have later highlights, it's not a straightforward location, as legitimate access would need to be managed such that any future enforcement and penalty charge notices would only be issued against non-compliant, unauthorised vehicles. As and when a way forward is agreed, a 6-week consultation on the principle of KCC enforcing this site will be required in line with government guidance. Thank you for your question. We've got another question from Anthony Pearson, who's here in person. If you'd like to come to the desk and press the button that looks like a face, and you can ask your question.
Thank you. I have read the statement that the closure of Cranbourne Avenue has resulted in a small increase in traffic on Plains Avenue. I live on Plains Avenue, close to the Lewes Road junction. I would like to know how this small increase has been ascertained, because as a resident of Plains Avenue, I've noticed a substantial increase in traffic with long queues of vehicles trying to exit Plains Avenue onto Lewes Road. I'm unaware of any traffic surveys being carried out in Plains Avenue since the closure of Cranbourne Avenue.
Thank you. The observed data captured in the surveys carried out in September 2021 and June 2022 showed that two-way movements on Plains Avenue at the junction with the A229 saw an increase of 69 vehicles in the AM peak and 46 vehicles in the PM peak, i.e. in the AM peak, the worst case saw just over 1 additional vehicle a minute. Observed queues were recorded at a maximum of 7 vehicles. We are aware of concerns from residents about queuing vehicles at Plains Avenue and have also carried out our own site observations during the AM and PM peak periods at different times. These have generally aligned with the data observed from the September 2021 and June 2022 traffic surveys, but we will continue to monitor traffic in Plains Avenue. There will obviously be daily variations in traffic numbers, often caused as a direct consequence of incidents elsewhere on the wider Maidstone area, which unfortunately at times means additional traffic gets transferred to local roads. In terms of vehicles trying to exit from Plains Avenue, whilst it's acknowledged that Plains Avenue can be more difficult to turn right from, we believe the subsequent refreshing of the yellow box marking across the junction on Lewes Road has greatly assisted this manoeuvre. KCC are also considering extending the length of the existing double yellow lines in Plains Avenue, as it's been observed there are existing conflicts with movements into and out of the junction. If this is progressed, this will be advertised as a separate TRO consultation. Do you have a supplementary question arising out of the original question or the reply?
Yes, the yellow box that we mentioned only covers half of the loose road, the half nearest to Plains Avenue. If that was extended across the whole width of the road, that would make things rather more safer, because trying to turn right, you have the yellow box to protect you on one half of the road and zero protection from traffic approaching from the left over the other half of the road. I would also say that the constant flow of traffic during busy periods or most of the day now makes it very difficult to actually access and egress from our driveway, and has resulted in us getting stuck on Plains Avenue, trying to find a gap in the traffic to reverse into our driveway, and suffering abuse from drivers trying to get up Plains Avenue and seeing us as the obstruction that we are because we can't get into our driveway, which has been quite distressing for my wife on some occasions.
Could you draw that to a question?
The question was, are there any plans to extend the yellow box across the whole width of the loose road and to improve the safety of the loose road junction?
I will take that away and obviously consult with KCC Highways, and I'll get a written response back to you. We have your details. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't think we have our last member of the public, so I will read out his question. So we have, our last question is from Andrew Hammersley. The decision to permanently close Cranbourne Avenue has been based on the comparison of data collected in September and again in June. How does KCC believe this to be a valid comparison when traffic flow in September is very different to that in June? For example, in June, school years 11 and 13 are not travelling to school. So the answer is, for traffic counts to be valid for transport assessments, they must be carried out in neutral periods where the impact of school holidays, etc., do not influence traffic figures. Both June and September are defined as neutral months in DMRB CA 185 and also in DFT's Transport Analysis Guide TAG Unit M1.2. An extract from the latter is included below. 3.3.7, neutral periods are defined as Mondays to Thursdays from March through to November, excluding August, providing adequate lighting is available and avoiding the weeks before after Easter, the Thursday before and all of the week of a bank holiday and the school holidays. Surveys may be carried out outside of these days, months, ensuring that the conditions being surveyed, e.g. traffic flow, are representative of the transport condition being analysed and modelled. The traffic counts were carried out on the 9th of June 2022, allowing enough time to elapse after the implementation of the closure to allow regular travel patterns to be established and to avoid any impacts from Easter, half-term holidays and bank holidays, noting that there was an additional bank holiday in 2022 due to the King's coronation. We also wanted traffic data captured prior to the end of the 6-month TRO consultation and ahead of the plan works at the A229 Lewes Road, Armstrong Road, Parkway Junction, which were carried out between September 2022 and February 2023. The traffic flows recorded in the September 2021 and June 2022 surveys did also show a close comparison. This is noted in section 2.14 of the CNA report, which states the total traffic throughput at the junction during weekday peak periods was almost identical in both 2021 and 2022. This highlights that the two datasets are valid and broadly comparable. KCC will continue to monitor the junction to review the impact that this intervention has had to inform the final design of the Wheatsheaf junction. Thank you. That concludes this item. So now we're moving on to item 12, which is the Maidstone Joint Transportation Work Programme, and that is on page 9 of your agenda pack. In the chairman's briefing, I have just requested one item be added to the forward plan, which is that obviously in KCC's overview and scrutiny committee recently, they were discussing the future of the joint transportation boards. And the advice that came out of that and then went to cabinet was that they should be looked at to be a new form going forwards. I spoke to the cabinet member for highways from KCC, and I've asked that if possible, he brings a briefing note as to how that will be worked through to the next meeting in February. And he's taken that on board and agreed to do that. Do we have any other comments on the forward plan work programme? Nope. Okay, so now we're moving on. Do we have? Okay, move the work programme be noted. Is that agreed? Yeah. Okay. Just to confirm as well, we didn't have any questions from members to the chairman on item 11. Apologies for missing that one. Do we have? Yeah, I think I will. Okay, I think we might skip past item 13 just for a moment. The reason is the benefit might be that we might be able to achieve the presence of the KCC cabinet member for highways, which I think would be very worthwhile for the discussion. So if we can move on then to item 14, which is the King Street moving traffic enforcement update on pages 1 to 7 of your agenda pack. We don't have anyone to introduce this report from KCC. So I'll just do a quick introduction, which is the report summary updates members on KCC's moving traffic enforcement project. And I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. Oh, and did you were on this one? Sorry, Councillor Cleater, please approach for your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's not before time that something's done about the terrible traffic situation in King Street and High Street. I can't actually remember a time where I've had so many near misses. And yes, I know I wear glasses, but I know how to cross a road. The other issue is also mopeds, various Just Eat, Deliveroo, etc. people who seem to have very little knowledge of the highway code, and even if they do, they're blatantly ignoring it. I, in the last 3 years, have seen one person pulled over by the police. Other than that, there's no enforcement. I know how frustrating it can be to get a ticket, because believe me, when I went to Reading, I took a wrong turning and ended up with a fine down their High Street when I was attempting to find the entrance to a hotel I was staying at. But the traffic moved freely there. The buses move freely, the taxis move freely. Sometimes the buses are held up because of inconsiderately parked traffic. And we are not talking about people who are using the disabled bays who are disabled. We are just talking about people who are just parked there. I would welcome enforcement, and I think this is the thing. We've probably got the rules now, but there's no one to enforce them. And if they're not enforced, then people just flout it. I have a son who lives in Pudding Lane, and it's a nightmare there. It's like Dodge City when you're trying to get round, as many members know, when we go to the car park to park. So I would welcome a speedy resolution to this and not kicking it into the long grass. This is not something that you're going to get a lot of complaints about from people who actually are pedestrians around here. So I would welcome a speedy conclusion to whatever KCC decides to do.
Thank you. If I could offer some reassurance that I think it does say the contract's expected to be up and running in November 2023. I've got Councillor Clark first.
Thank you, Chairman. I must be honest, looking at the proceedings from last JTB, I wasn't expecting to see the permanent closure happening before this JTB, especially given that residents were told that they could bring their questions this evening. I find that very disappointing.
Sorry, Councillor Clark, we skipped that one. We're on item 14, the ANPR, just because I wanted to wait so that we had the KCC cabinet member for highways. Okay. Did you still? No, wait for that one. Okay. And then I've got Councillor English.
By complete coincidence, I was visiting one of the officers of one of my residents' associations in the town centre, and she unprompted raised the issue of traffic driving up this particular road. And asked when some action was going to be taken about it, and she observed that since the government had rolled out the powers under the 2006 Highways Act, Kent County Council did have the opportunity to do this. I noticed that my request to actually look at the broader implications of that rollout has been put off until February, which is a full 2 years after I asked for it. So it's a shame that we haven't had that discussion yet. But focusing specifically on this particular route, I think if it's not ironic to use the word, to agree with the use of the word speedy in this location, I think that the quicker this matter is resolved and enforcement is placed in this locality, the better, and it will be generally welcomed. The fact is there has been some enforcement. It's not true there hasn't been any. There have been operations carried out, but it is not consistent and it is not a high priority for enforcement because of all the other things going on. It's not true there hasn't been any, but this proposal, if it went ahead, would make things significantly clearer and would set, in my view, a sort of line in the sand which shows that Kent County Council is actually willing to deal with this sort of issue, which actually sends out a broader signal about the local authority, which I think would be welcome.
Thank you, Councillor English. I've got Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Before I go on to item 14, can I just thank you for all your efforts over the last few months in trying to get some common sense out of KCC with regard to attendance as an officer. I was fighting with you, but I was pleased to see what went on. I think we got some answers. I certainly got some answers in the end on my questions. So thank you for your help.
Thank you.
Can I talking about item 14? I am assuming this is just talking about King Street. We're not talking about anywhere else, because it's rather worrying. Every one of those items there, we've seen for a long time. It's been very frustrating that we see things happening, but never any enforcement. It's not just in King Street, it's anywhere. We don't see it. So what worries me about this, it doesn't worry me that it's going to be aimed at King Street initially and sensibly, and I fully and totally support that. What worries me about this is all the other areas where if they don't have ANPR cameras and they aren't taken on board by KCC, who is going to enforce them? I've got one of the case at the moment where we've got problems outside 2 schools where people keep going the wrong way down a one-way street. It's a nasty one-way street. There's been nearby, there's been a swallow hole, and it's made people, all they've done is ignore the no entry signs on the road and on the posts, and they just go down it. I've talked to the police, they just didn't want to know. I'm at the stage of the police and crime commissioner at the moment, and probably to the chief, probably going up to the chief by the time it finishes, but I'll get something done about it. But at the moment, I'm getting a refusal from the police, and 101 was a waste of time, to be honest. So the question I've got, Chairman, is who at the moment, if anybody, has any right in place to enforce those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items which are outlined under this Act, which is now handed over to Kent County Council?
Might ask Barry to answer this one if he's there. I should imagine it would be the police, but KCC could do the ANPR, but I would just ask for clarification if he could help that with that one.
Hi, Councillor Russell. I don't know the answer, so I believe it is the police, as you say, and until such time as we've carried out consultation for the ANPR cameras, as stated in the previous update. But I can take the question back to colleagues and provide an answer after the meeting.
Oh, thank you. That would be great. And thank you, Councillor Chittenden. I've got Councillor Cook next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just very briefly, I think what Kent County Council did announce when this first came out, and which was warmly welcomed by this committee, was the locations that they proposed to install the cameras, and it covered more than just speeding and those things. I'm particularly keen to see the camera on the B2163 to monitor and take action against the overweight lorries that are are using that particular road. That's something that's very close to the residents that I represent, and I'm keen to see that happen, in Councillor Peters' words, as soon as possible. So there are 5 different locations. So I think looking forward, it would be quite helpful to have an update across that whole spectrum of what is proposed in terms of implementation for the and maybe we could ask the officers at KCC to bring that forward at a suitable time. I do agree that there may be some other areas that we might like to then suggest, but let's get the first 5 up and running and working in the way that they're designed to work before we then start looking to install these things more widely. And I will welcome the initial 5 that was initially announced when the opportunity came forward for this, and as I say, was warmly welcomed by the Maidstone JTB. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Item 14 was obviously just on the narrow subject, which was King Street moving traffic enforcement update. So, but would you like me to add something to the forward plan work programme for the other?
I think that would probably have. I'm happy to move that if that's required, but I think that would have the support of
Councillor English.
the board.
Happy to second that. I would have thought, given we are supposed to have the wider report at the February meeting, it would make sense to bring it forward at that time, if it's ready.
So add it to the February meeting then. And I've got Councillor Ash had his hand up.
That one. Okay. Hopefully this is on the right subject. I often catch the 10X from the top of Gabriel's Hill through to Bearsted. I have actually waited for more than 10 minutes, knowing the bus is just below the town hall, waiting for it to come. Traffic sometimes does not move at all. And it's really frustrating when you can see your bus and 10 minutes later, you actually get on it. This is not the way that the public transport system should work. But I don't know what the hold-ups are, but sometimes things do not move at all. Everybody is totally stationary. Somebody is causing it, but I don't know what it is. But certainly through that stretch of the town centre, things have got to improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ash. I had Councillor Clark again.
Chairman, I was wondering if, as part of that work program item, we could do some modelling to work out if we can all come up with suggestions of where this could be beneficial, but it would be good to actually have some data to say how it will help us, guide us to prioritise. The one that comes to mind personally is the yellow box junction at St Peter's Bridge. In the morning, that it is an absolute nightmare for children getting to Maplestone Noakes, Gowes Grammar, and even the Oakwood Park campus. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, it's an absolute nightmare for people getting to the retail side of things. And I just feel that one change there could affect an awful lot. And I'd like to see some sort of weighting on the items we put forward.
So with the item that's going to come forward to the committee in February, would everybody agree to add on? We've got the 5. No, I better take a vote on that.
And if I might come back, I'm sorry, Brian, but I actually disagree with you. In the longer term, I'm sure that's right, and modelling would need to be done to assess what's right and appropriate. But in the meantime, what's being asked is let's spend money on doing all this modelling whilst we haven't even got the first 5 in place. Let's get let's get what was been announced and we agreed with done first, and then we can have a look. And yes, we can then maybe look at some prioritisation. But I don't want to be calling for modelling to be done to prioritise areas when we haven't even got the basic group bit done to start with. So I'm sorry. I think what we've got in terms of asking for February is perfectly adequate, and I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
Okay, so if you don't have a seconder, I think I'd better take a vote on the original motion, which was to add the items, the 5 items to the forward work plan for February. The original. I'll just get the wording. Oh, and can I add that you also want to note this report at the same time to do me safe? So you're going to note this report as it is, and then in the February meeting, you're going to bring forward a report on the 5 areas, initial areas, to look at the ANPR. Yeah. Yeah. And votes for? Oh.
Just to clarify, I'm happy to go ahead with the proposal as it is. I
Okay.
just think we should be modeling as we go forward. The later stages, we could come up with ad hoc ways in which we can implement the items, but I think it would be good to have data. But I'm happy to support the proposal.
Okay, well, let's go for that. Let's start at the start and then we'll move forward from there. Seems very sensible. Right. So can we all agree that the report is noted? Right. Fine. As amended. We still don't have the cabinet member, so I will move on to item 15, which is the Kent County Council approach to electric vehicle charging. We don't have anyone to introduce this report, so I'll do my best. The report gives a broad overview of the EV charging network in Kent, and we'll look at Kent County Council's role specifically in ensuring our residents and businesses are able to switch to electric vehicles. It looks at the current number of EV chargers in Kent and outlines any developments that have occurred since KCC's allocation of local electric vehicle infrastructure funding. This report, I will just remind you, is for information only. Does anyone have any comments? So, oh, Councillor Passmore.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Chairman, just to say, I think it's a very difficult area to work in terms of what the right solution is for electric car charging, especially if you don't have access to home charging. And I think the only strategy has to be to pursue, as suggested here, a sort of multi-tier strategy where we try to see whether car parks, lampposts or other options can work to provide the infrastructure we need for the future.
Thank you. I mean, obviously this report is Kent-wide, so we've taken the opportunity to go to the Maidstone, Head of Environment and Public Realm. So they have quarterly meetings to discuss progress with NBC and KCC supporting each other. So our NBC own programme is to focus on off-street charging car parks based on demand and to come forward with some further proposals with data. Do we have any other comments? No, so that's that one. They're excellent. They're here now. So we can go back to item 13, which is the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package. I have a visiting member, Councillor Cleater, who wants to speak to this item. Oh, sorry. Let's Barry introduce it first. Good idea.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Hopefully you can hear me okay.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was just checking before I started. Okay, I'll just run through briefly the updates provided. So I'll just go through in the order it's written. So starting with the A249 Bicester Road, as advised in the update, the site offices and the compound are now in place. We've continued the drainage works within a crematorium. They're continuing, expected to be complete by Christmas. We've also commenced drainage works to the south of the compound area. And they're continuing, and following that completion of the drainage works, further works will carry on to commence the widening works in that area. We're anticipating breaking through into the Newnham Court Way site to start the offline construction at the end of October, early November. In terms of the wider programme, we're still finalising the overall programme with the contractor, working with utility companies. But it's not anticipated that we'd be carrying out any significant works on the actual highway until after Christmas. The focus prior to Christmas will be concentrated on the internal roads. In terms of M20 Junction 7, we've now had the seal funding confirmed, and we're progressing the appointment of a consultant to help us progress the design and to coordinate the approvals with National Highways. In terms of the programme for that site, we're not anticipating carrying out any works there until after the completion of Bearsted Road and also the M2 Junction 5 improvement for obvious reasons in terms of road space and conflicting traffic management. The A20 Cold Harbour roundabout, we're in the final process of the procurement, just concluding the final negotiations with tenderers, and we expect final tenders to be received at the end of next week and hope to award the contracts in early November that will lead to a commencement of the project in early January and completion towards the end of November. Hall Road, as advised previously, we're not proceeding with the roundabout scheme. Currently exploring options based on updated traffic data, looking at ways to resolve the current drainage problem that's outside of home base on the A20, and that predominantly involves discussions with Crown Estate, who own the South Aylesford Retail Park. Moving on to the A229 Lewes Road Corridor. I'll skip the Wheatsheaf update and I'll come back to that one at the end. It's probably appropriate. So moving on to the Armstrong Road Parkway Junction. That was completed earlier this year, and over August there were some modifications made to the signals. They introduced separate right turn filters for the turning traffic into Armstrong Road and Parkway. That's been completed, as I say, and there's been a couple of tweaks to fine tune it. And from what we've heard, it's been performing well, although I think there's probably different views from different people depending on their perspective. Shields Crescent is currently paused whilst we review the impacts that Armstrong Road's made to the network. Lewes Road, Cripple Street, Broughton Lane Junction, as advised previously, that has now been cancelled, primarily because there was objections to taking any of the green space land in front of the shops. We've explored alternative options, and there's not anything that's possible to improve the capacity of that junction. Moving on to the A20 Ashford Road, Wellington Street Junction. That's currently programmed to be carried out following completion of Bearsted Road, primarily due to the conflicting programme with the getting road space for that part of the network. Summit Road, Fountain Lane. Status hasn't changed from previous update. We're still reviewing the proposal with a consultant, looking at existing predicted traffic flows. That's nearing completion, and an update will be provided at a future JTB meeting. Just to note on that one, we've also had an approach from some local councillors, and we're arranging a meeting with them to discuss the scheme. And the A274 Sutton Road Junction, currently it's not being progressed at the current time. In terms of resources, they've been focused on delivering the schemes with LGF funding. So just moving back to the Wheatsheaf update. As advised in previous updates, we wanted to progress this scheme in two phases. One was the phase one which involved the experimental TRO for the closure of Cranbourne Avenue, and then phase 2 would be the implementation of the final scheme, taking into account the traffic data that was recorded from the closure of Cranbourne. So we carried out pre and after surveys of pre and after closures, pre and after surveys of the closure to inform the decision to whether Cranbourne should remain closed. The evidence that was produced from the traffic counts and the reporting by our consultants confirmed that significant benefits were produced for the junction at Wheatsheaf from the closure of Cranbourne, in that it reduced the queues on approaches quite significantly. The other consideration is clearly around traffic safety, and that's been raised previously about Plains Avenue. So we've compared the two junctions at Cranbourne and Plains Avenue. Plains Avenue up to April 23 over the last 5 years, there was no recorded personal injury accidents or crashes, shall I say. And at the Cranbourne Avenue in the same period, there were three crashes directly affecting Cranbourne Avenue. One of those was a fatality involving a cyclist. We're aware there's been a subsequent crash at Plains Avenue in August, but we're not aware from reports we've received from the police that it involves any personal injuries. During the consultation that was carried out during the first 6 months of the TRO being in place, we received 96 responses, 73 objections, 23 in support of the proposals. And not unsurprisingly, most of those objections received were directly from the residents within the area directly affected. So we presented this information to our cabinet member in September, at the beginning of September, and the decision was made based on that information to keep Cranbourne closed, primarily through the demonstration of the benefits achieved to the wider road network, and also concerns about safety of reopening the road and causing confusion and uncertainty to drivers if a decision was made in the future under phase 2 to permanently close Cranbourne. So there's probably an apology to make in terms of how the information was portrayed at last JTB update. So there was some incorrect wording in the report. So it wasn't possible for us to take a report to this JTB on the decision around the closure because of the dates of the conclusion of the experimental TRO.
Thank you.
I think that's probably a summary of where we are at the moment. So welcome any questions.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we have a visiting member, Councillor Cleater, who wants to speak to this item. Please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I said it right, Gary, because you always tell me off when I say chair. I'd just like to thank the KCC officers for attending. I think it's important for elected members, both county and borough, to have accountable officers presenting the report. So I'd like to thank Barry and Haruna, the director, for attending this evening. I think Barry alluded to some of the issues that have gone on around Cranbourne Avenue. Now, that is a patch that I cover in my day job for social services. I don't know what methodology was used and whether the consultants who produced the report actually went and visited the area, but I drive round there very, very frequently. The traffic in Shepway is absolutely horrendous now, whether they're trying to avoid Wellington Street, whether they are avoiding the Lewes Road and the Sutton Road. It also applies to Parkway, and it also has seen Plains Avenue become another rat run. Now, that may mean that whatever methodology was used to obtain the information means that that bit of Lewes Road and up through to the Sutton Road is moving a bit better. But in terms of the residents who live on the rest of the estates, they are putting up with queuing traffic and the resultant pollution of traffic that's queuing. And those queues are there quite a long time. I travel to Shepway, yes, to do my council work, but also to support vulnerable people there. Buses are delayed. There are issues around when parents are trying to get their children to school. And this is all traffic that is trying to avoid the Lewes Road. It's been made worse now, and we've had questions from residents in Cranbourne Road, but I have to say the communication has been very poor, because let's be clear here, those no entry signs went up as permanent no entry signs way before allegedly the decision had been made, according to the paperwork that we've had. So I'm very pleased that officers have turned up today, but I think that for the residents on Shepway, for the residents who live close by, this has not been KCC's finest hour in consulting, listening and taking on board what they say. In terms of the pub that's been bought, I've been around long enough to remember when Brunswick Street, Foster Street, Melville Road, Kingsley Road, all those houses were purchased for road schemes that never ever happened. The Wheat Chief, either we need to know whether that is going ahead and that pub is going to be demolished, or if it's not, what the future is for that. Because again, that was a local resource that was well used and well loved by the local people that they've lost. So they are my points. What are the methodology was used? How long did the consultant spend actually identifying that information in person, or was this just a desktop review of data that was supplied to them? Because I think it's very important to the people who live in that area as to how that information was obtained and what the methodology was used to come up with the conclusions.
Thank you, Councillor Cleater. Before I open the debate, I just really wanted to say that my issue with this has been the clarity of the decision making and the access to representation that residents have had throughout the process. I'm pleased that the great deal of work that went on behind the scenes, me and my Vice Chair, Councillor Cannon, was really recognised. But I think, you know, I recognise that this is an advisory board. It's important to recognise that. We're not a decision-making board. KCC are the decision makers for highways. Excuse me. Items, they're the Highways Authority. But it would have been nice if we could have programmed an extraordinary meeting or something so that the views of the board could have been captured, the residents' questions could have been captured prior to the decision being made. But I have made my views on that very clear. I will now open the debate. And before I do, it's actually really good because we've got a third party with us. Would the board permit to accept the third party, who is Councillor Neil Baker, who is the Cabinet Member for Highways for KCC? Obviously, he would be a third party, so the board would need to agree, but then you would be able to ask your questions directly to him. Would that be agreed? Perfect. Okay, so first on the running list, I've got Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. As I started earlier, I find it very disappointing that we got to this point where residents registered to speak. They were told that they could ask their questions in this session, and the decision was made before we even got here. I think that there's a lot of concern locally about Cranbourne Avenue. Much has been mentioned to this point, but the thing that I feel has been missed is what actually happens to the traffic that would normally be controlled by those lights. We were told that we would be giving, during the consultation, we'd be given data on how that influences the traffic in that vicinity. And I don't feel that even now, we all drive those roads, we all see what happens in those roads, but I think we've just really looked at what happens on the A229 corridor, and that has taken complete priority. And we've got 76% of respondents that have said they don't want it. They've objected to it. Okay, it may be that there are benefits to the wider network, but they didn't respond. It wasn't as if we had 76% of people from all across Maidstone saying they wanted the closure. It actually was the large body of people responding did not want it to go ahead. And I feel that, yes, clearly a preference has been given over the network, over people's considerations, but we look at other junctions like Willington Street and the Sutton Road, which has been kicked in the long grass, and officers have said every time it's been discussed that the maximum plan at that junction would mitigate the Langley Park housing. So I see two different approaches being taken with two different junctions. Now, in terms of our local plan, we talk about these as individual junctions as part of this JTB, but this junction package was formed a key part of our local plan, Maidstone's local plan. So regardless of the delivery by KCC, we started off with a programme, we've whittled it down. The local plan inspector approved the adopted local plan 2017 with all of these junctions. We've just lost Cripple Street. I mean, there's no discussion about where those funds will be reallocated. We've just lost it. We started off with 10.55 million between the sellout funds and the developer contribution. What's happened to that in these inflationary times when we're dragging on and on and on? I mean, I can see this whittling down every year as we go through, as inflation bites, and we'll end up with half of what we originally planned to do. I mean, this proposal for the wheat sheaf, the recommendation, do minimum. I mean, that is the recommendation. Obviously, I assume that most members have read the papers. So we're basically closing Cranbourne Avenue and doing some traffic signal upgrades. I think people would find that completely lacking in ambition on a corridor that is essentially the funnel that leads to the housing south of Maidstone. I do have some specific questions. Armstrong Road, that's now been delivered. We've had the updates. There is clearly a problem with pedestrian safety on the crossing because we really need a yellow box junction. We've discussed it previously. Officers have said that looking at the video evidence of people interacting with traffic, should we say, and the school runs Parkway, that a yellow box junction would be implemented. I don't see any plan for that. And I would like to know, are we going to get that yellow box junction? We previously talked about a right turn from Parkway and the fact that it can't be done because there was never an option for that. Now we're closing Cranbourne Avenue. Can we at least reconsider that? Because we talked about the road traffic accidents. If you look at the road traffic accident data along Armstrong Road, it's very bad. There are two parks either side of that road. Children run between one side and the other. And the only option for residents coming out of Parkway to go to town is by going along that corridor. And that's not intended to be a major trunk route into town. So I want, first of all, can we look at the yellow box junction? Can we look at the option of turning right and whether or not that can be achieved now that we've closed Cranbourne Avenue? I'd be interested to know how much we've spent of the 10.55 million since we started this programme. It was years ago that we secured that funding. I'd just like to know what's left. How much have we spent today? Is that something that we can bring back to this board?
So there were three questions: are the Armstrong Road, pedestrian safety, the crossing the yellow box junction, the right turn out of Parkway, if we could reconsider that, and how much we spent out of the 10.55 million. Barry, can you help with any of those?
You're welcome to take it offline and bring it back to us.
Thanks, Councillor Parks and Councillor Russell. There has been some correspondence with our signals team, I believe, about the yellow box marking, so I need to go back and check with them about the progress on that, whether it's something we can implement. And the other two matters, the right turn from Parkway, I think it was considered. One of the difficulties with improving a strategic road corridor is we're trying to get improvements on that corridor, and introduce another phase on those signals will almost be undoing those benefits. But it's certainly something I will take back and consult with colleagues and see what is achievable. In terms of funding, yes, we can come back on that point as well.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Thank you. Just to elaborate a little bit on the right turn, very early on we dismissed that because it wasn't something that we had in the original design, but I just think things have changed a little now. And if you think of the residents in Parkway, Plains Avenue, it's very, very difficult for them to turn into town, and they don't have the option at Parkway. We could mitigate that with the possible inclusion of a turn there. But I appreciate if you can go away and look into that. That'd be great.
Thank you.
Just to quickly come back to the point, it is a balance of flows as well, and by making that a signalised right turn, potentially that could encourage more people to go down that route. And I think we'd be then having a similar discussion that we're having about Plains Avenue. So it is a balance between just looking at the flows around the local network as well. But we'll certainly go back on that point and look at it further.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Clark. I've got Councillor Wilkinson next.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to talk about Cranbourne Avenue. I would like to thank the KCC Highways for presenting the traffic report, along with the long-awaited traffic data concerning the Plains Avenue Loose Road corridor. However, this does not include the data in the surrounding areas of Shepway, where during peak times is always at gridlock. You only have to look at the historical data on Google Maps to see where the traffic queues are. I also understand the necessity of collecting data over an extended period to make well-informed decisions. However, I find it unacceptable that the decision to permanently close Cranbourne Avenue was made without prior consultation with the committee and residents during the last JTB meeting. The explanation that this decision was influenced by a staff annual leave is unsatisfactory, as it left no provision for discussing such a crucial matter at the meeting. Furthermore, there has been a disregard for the residents' request for a meeting, which would have provided them with an opportunity to voice their concerns. Additionally, there has been a failure to address the questions raised by residents during the last JTB meeting in August. These actions display a complete lack of regard for the residents living in this area. The data may indicate a reduction in accidents and traffic since the closure of Cranbourne Avenue. However, it does not alleviate the residents' concerns about safety when exiting onto Loose Road from Plains Avenue. Apart from the update tonight, their requests for safety measures have been ignored, and they deserve a chance to engage in a discussion with KCC to ensure that all possible safety options are explored.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I think as we're lucky enough to have the Cabinet member for KCC Highways here, I think probably if you could just talk us through the decision-making process, obviously the consultation, just obviously quickly, because we have got the full report with all of the detail, but it would just be nice to know that sort of last bit, if you wouldn't mind, Neil, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. No, absolutely. And I think I just reiterate something that Barry said earlier. I mean, clearly, none of us want to be in the position we found ourselves in with the experimental order running out prior to this meeting and that timescale being the way round it was. What I will say is that when I, as cabinet member, was presented with the data, um, the officers who came to me outlined in quite some detail the concerns that residents had been expressing. And I was in a very difficult position of making that decision, which has now been made to make the order permanent. I did have conversations with Mr. Cooper as the local divisional member to get a feel for things as well. Not that I'm putting any blame on him, it's my decision alone, of course. And I think the overriding thing for me that swung it was that I had serious concerns that if the road were to be reopened to allow further discussions to be had, when the outcome of those discussions and actually a further decision would almost certainly, having seen the data, been to close it again. We would risk highway safety by being in a situation of having something that's been closed now for some time, being reopened for a brief period, only to then almost definitely being closed again. And as we see, one of the highways issues, conflicts with traffic, safety issues do tend to arise when there is uncertainty because things are changing too often. So my final reason to come down on making the order permanent when I did was based on the data, yes, but overridingly based on the fact that I didn't want to be in a position where confusion of opening and closing caused an accident that could then be pointed at that decision-making process and delays for causing it. Like I say, I hold my hands up, as others have as well, that the ordering was done wrong and we didn't have that ability to have these discussions first. I had to make the decision as I did. I had to put highway safety first, and I do stand by that. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Thank you, first of all, for attending this evening, and thank you for the going through your decision-making process there. Much appreciated. I've now got Councillor English.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It is useful to be able to have an actual exchange of views and a discussion, which is useful. I have to say, having come to JTBs over the years, their general effectiveness has, I'm afraid, rather declined. Let's hope we can reverse that trend and actually have some meaningful discussion. I now live in Moat Avenue, and I have to say it's not just Shetway that appears to be experiencing a increase in traffic. Perhaps unsurprisingly, once the traffic has gone down through South Park Road, which a fair amount of it does, and West Park Road, it comes out into High Street Ward. It also goes out into High Street Ward in other directions. So although I see the figures, I have to say it doesn't feel like that. It feels like and looks like every morning that there has been a significant increase in traffic. So the question is then, what do you do about it? We are where we are on the traffic order. I personally wouldn't confirm it, and I wouldn't go ahead with it. And we have been in a situation where, in the past, when this board was actually asked to make effectively decisions on traffic regulation orders, if we got a response rate like this, the traffic regulation order would have gone straight in the bin. However, we are where we are, and what concerns me now is that we don't have a situation where the adjoining roads, where there are clearly safety issues like Parkway, Plains Avenue and Armstrong Road, are neglected. And I think we need to pick up clearly the work that's needed to be done on those areas. And frankly, we do need a decision one way or the other about what's going to happen to the Wheatsheaf Junction, because having represented High Street Ward, where properties were blighted by the former scheme for the Southern Approach Road for something like 30 years, maybe longer, probably 50 years in some cases, uncertainty and confusion about the direction the Highway Authority or any other arm of local government is taking is an absolute killer. It's got to be brought to an end sooner or later. And if that scheme doesn't proceed. Well, there are plenty of other areas of Maidstone which could do with the money. Thinking of Fountain Lane, for example, or Hart Street, or wherever. So it would be unfortunate if we ended up with a scheme sitting there with a potential spend for a long time and nothing much happens. So I'd like to know what, well, I'd like an assurance that Armstrong Road, Parkway and Plains Avenue issues that have been identified will be addressed, and not just, and this decision will not just be, oh, job done, move on to the next thing.
Thank you, Councillor English. Barry, would you be able to answer where we are with the, I know you were saying you were doing continuing monitoring going forwards, but maybe the time, if there is any timeline on the week sheaf, and how we would be frequency of monitoring perhaps for Armstrong Road, Plains Road, and going forwards. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Russell. Just to confirm, the works at Armstrong Road are subject to a safety audit, which is due to be carried out next month, and that's been held up whilst we're waiting for the filter lanes to be installed. It's been monitored pretty much all the time by our signals team, and that identified the need to introduce the separate right turn filters. In terms of wheat sheaf, works are progressing with our consultant to really consolidate the information that's been obtained from the various surveys, and there's been a recent survey carried out as well. And to answer a point I think it was Councillor Cleater raised earlier, the consultant is local. They have visited the site. It's not just based sitting in an office looking at raw data. They've been looking at how people use the road, as well as just looking at the factual data. So there is a certain amount of interpretation that goes on that informs the reports that are produced. So I would expect that prior to the next JTB, we'll be providing an update on a decision regarding wheat sheaf and what that final scheme looks like.
Thank you very much. I think we all breathe a sigh of relief to hear that it's a local consultant that actually is going to visit the area. I've got Councillor Cook next, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I first refer to the 249 scheme in Bearsted and the para 212, which relates to the drainage works to establish the settlement lagoon and new drainage outfall within the Maidstone crematorium are continuing. That work also impacts upon the nature reserve, that is in that location, and I'm a trustee of that nature reserve. So would the officers please, as it relates to this piece of work, note that interest? I don't consider it a pecuniary interest or anything else, and proceed to continue to take a full part in this debate. But I am a trustee of that, and I think that needs to be declared. I think the Neil has given a good explanation of why he made the decision that he did, and I understand that. I do think, though, it's in terms of the timing of that, it's a little bit sad that we are put into the situation of keeping something closed because we're not at the timescale doesn't allow us to open it and then reclose it, and the confusion that might create locally. I think a more timely approach to this in this type of situation in the future. The reason for closing something permanently should not be the presence of potential confusion. It should be the presence of supporting data that actually sets that out in a proper way, and that's exactly the reason why we always expect the people who are most impacted by schemes to have a strong view on it. It affects them, and we have to take that into account. But it's not a decision-making element. And I would just remind Councillor Clark that he was prepared to override huge opposition to the Sutton Road, Wellington Street from local residents there when that scheme came forward. And that was a huge body of public opinion, which he was seen to be more than happy to override, to force the widening of Sutton Road, which is still something that we have to look at and we'll get to at some point in the future. And I will continue to oppose that on behalf of the residents that I represent there as well. But my principal thing was to, I think I needed to declare an interest. And then when I saw the lagoon works, I remembered it. So thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. I've got Councillor Cooper next, please.
Madam Chairman, thank you very much. And I do wish to thank officers and Mr. Baker, who I met with several weeks ago, just before the closure of Cranbourne Avenue was made permanent. I think there is an acceptance that the timings and certainly the ordering of coming to Joint Transportation Board and making the order permanent is far from ideal, but I think we are where we are, and I'm not entirely convinced the decision would have been different otherwise. Nevertheless, I think there is an acceptance and an assurance that this won't happen again. I want to start not about Cranbourne Avenue, but I will move on to that, about generally the MITP. There is a frustration within Maidstone, and I don't think the frustration is just with the Borough Council, but a general frustration that there has been slow progress. This was alluded to in detail by Councillor Clark. Inflation is eroding away at the spending power of that pot of money. I think we need certainty as quickly as we can about what is happening, and I think a lot of the situation at Cranbourne Avenue would have been improved had there been more clarity and had things happened in a joined up way and perhaps somewhat quicker. I remember being assured back in 2018 that I would be able to cut the ribbon for the junction at the new junction that was being opened at the Wheatsheaf in advance of my election, which was in 2021. Here we are at the beginning of 2023, and with the exception of the closure of Cranbourne Avenue, we don't have progress there. And that's just one of several. So I really would like to see progress there, so that we can utilise the funding from SELA to its maximum capacity and indeed improve journey times for the residents of Maidstone. Very specifically on Cranbourne Avenue, the Wheatsheaf junction falls slap bang in the middle of my county council patch. It is quite difficult because there is fairly strong opposition, very strong opposition from certain parts about this closure, and I completely understand that. I also accept the need to improve journey times as much as we can, and whilst people might not feel that strongly about one closure when they're heading north to south, it does benefit them. However, some of the concerns I think do need to be dealt with in an expedient manner, particularly about user safety. Vehicles turning out of Plains Avenue, for instance, is something that was raised by me and by Councillor Clark, amongst others, a number of years ago. And I fear that it hasn't been dealt with yet, largely because we haven't dealt with the Wheatsheaf junction. I know that traffic lights wouldn't be appropriate at that junction because it would slow down the flow, but something does need to be done. I don't want to be too prescriptive about what my view is of that, but we really must press on with that. I think meeting with residents and trying to understand how we can improve matters and understanding exactly where the flow of traffic that was travelling through Cranbourne Avenue is exactly going would be very helpful. I apologise, I've sort of lost my flow of where I was getting to now. I think that the main thrust of my point is specifically with Cranbourne Avenue, we do need to address perhaps Parkway and certainly to a much greater extent the safety or albeit the perceived safety of vehicles turning out of Plains Avenue so that we don't inconvenience people who are leaving Shepway Estate, and so that we're not merely displacing queues of traffic from one part of Shepway Estate to literally outside somebody else's front drive. If we could deal with that as quickly as we possibly can with the new junction, I would be greatly relieved. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cooper. I've got Councillor Clark again.
Thank you, Jim. I will just address this point about Willington Street and Wallace Avenue. Myself and Councillor Chittenden made a proposal to bring that design back because KCC had requested it as developer-funded mitigation for Langley Park. KCC requested that. It wasn't me that requested it. This board voted to progress that scheme. However, the cabinet member decided not to progress it. So that went against the decision made by this board, in the same way that previously this board has decided cross-party in the same way not to progress Cranbourne Avenue, and the cabinet member made a decision that wasn't necessarily in alignment with that vote at this board. Going back to the reason I indicated, I just wanted to make a comment about the way traffic orders work. Several years ago, I put a scheme forward in Armstrong Road, working with KCC officers, and it's pertinent because we're talking about Armstrong Road, where people come out of Parkway across, and there is high incidence of road traffic accidents. Working with KCC officers, we decided to do yellow lines on both sides of that carriageway towards the roundabout. That went out to consultation, and there were more than five objections. And I was told that because there were more than 5 objections, I'm afraid it has to go to JTB. And as part of that, we ended up losing one side, even though officers were saying that sight lines to the zebra crossing in Armstrong Road would be improved if we brought about yellow lines on both sides. There were over 5 objections. We heard the objectors, and that was lost. On this occasion, we don't even get to, it almost seemed at the time I was told, oh, as soon as you get this number of objections, it has to go to a JTB and we have to make a decision as a group. That didn't happen here, and this is a far more substantial proposal. So I just want to indicate that, I just want to raise that point. But secondly, to the officer, to Barry, I did want to raise a couple of very small points, given that we're finalising Armstrong Road. And it actually started around that time that as you come out of Armstrong Road towards the A229 carriageway, the eastbound lane essentially fans into 2 as it comes to the junction. And when traffic is turning right into the Lewes Road towards the Wheatsheaf, traffic on the left-hand side mounts the curb to get past them. And I was actually there with an officer while that was happening, and I'd asked that as part of the overall design for this junction, could we either have a railing there to just at one point where you could put a railing and you would completely stop it from happening, or several bollards. But I hope you can have a look at that as part of the finalisation, because it's something that I've raised on a number of occasions. I've raised it with Russell, and I was told that it could be done. The point was understood, but I don't see that railing at this point. Well, actually, that's really my last point. I think maybe we should consider yellow lines further on the northbound carriageway of Armstrong Road, but that may be something that can be considered later, just because of the sight lines on that zebra crossing.
Thank you. So a couple of points there, Barry, if you wouldn't mind. It was where the eastbound traffic turns on the left, it mounts the curb to, so whether there could be a bollard or if there could be a railing, and then whether the yellow lines on northbound carriageway of Armstrong Road could be put in place or looked at least.
We can certainly explore it. I know footway widths are quite tight, and we need to set any street furniture half a metre away from the channel line. So we need to be wary of that and causing obstructions, but we can certainly look at it and see whether it's achievable. As I said earlier, we've still got the safety audit to conclude at that site, and we will see what that delivers in terms of any other interventions.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Chittenden next.
Thank you, Chairman. As this debate's been going on, I've been wondering where to start, to be quite honest. I almost dread waking up every morning and looking at the Facebook pages and what's gone on in Maidstone with regard to traffic. And you see the frustration of people, and the frustration over the years has got worse and worse. The traffic's got worse and worse because of the number of houses. And yet we've barely succeeded in the last 7 years since we sat down, and I can remember where we did it and how we did it, to agree this list of jobs that needed doing, list of junctions that needed improving to give Maidstone a better flow of traffic. And if you look 7 years later, if you look at the Armstrong Road, that's probably the smallest one of the lot. That's been relatively successfully completed, but it's still this morning, and the rest is still to do. From the other one, from my point of view, Bearsted Road is now going. It's 3 years later than what we expected it to be. I hope it doesn't come to a stop. The timetable still keeps slipping. But the biggest worry for me today is that with this report is the number of bits that really have been put back almost totally. Whether they'll go ahead, whether we'll get Willington Street and Sutton Road, which I thought was absolutely an essential one in the early days and got turned down several times for reasons I still don't understand, or whether we get one or two of the others. I hope every time we come back to the JCB in the future that we get something positive every time. I heard what Mr. Barry Stiff said, and I have to say, I appreciate what the officer's problem is. 2 years ago, they were handed everything. The people who were on it disappeared, and that team was handed everything to do with Maidstone. They suddenly had to double the workload. So, you've got to give praise where it's due. But I hope we do hear next time there'll be something nice and positive, whether it's the wheat sheaf or whether it's good progress with a date on the end and the money available. I don't know. But we can't just keep going on like this and say, okay, well, this time we've had to slow this one down. This time we've got to slow something else down. Please, let's make sure we've got at least one or two positive items that show progress and show the people out there, our bosses, if you like, the residents, that we really are doing some progress, because at the moment it still doesn't show. My last actual comment is, with the jobs that are now with Hall Road and the others which are now saying is being put back to goodness knows when, is there any chance some of that money going to Fountain Lane and Linton Crossroads? Those are the two ones that have been sitting there also for 7 years, and both of which need, especially Fountain Lane, in my opinion. Is there any chance of any of that money going to either of those two jobs? And that is my question, Chairman.
Thank you. As a person that is regularly stuck at Fountain Lane for a very long time, twice a day, I completely feel your pain, and I have made my views known time and time again on that one. Yeah, obviously there's further work to do on these, and I know I have spoken to Barry about both of them and pleaded a case for Fountain Lane, but they're still looking at it. I mean, they will obviously bring another update in February, and I know he's listening, so please have a look at that scheme again, I think. I don't know if you've got any further comments, Barry.
Not particularly, only that, as I think I've said in previous JTBs, these are all very constrained, challenging junction. And if there was an easy solution to any of these, we would have been resolved years ago. So they are challenging. There is more and more housing being built in Maidstone that's delivering more and more traffic at really constrained junctions. And it's just really challenging as a highway authority to deliver real improvements. But we are looking at what we can achieve, mostly within highway footprint.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Cannon next, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, I was quite critical of the last JTB, so I did want to just say I'm really pleased to see the attendance of officers and Haruna and Neil at this JTB. I think that's a really welcome step. I just wanted to focus on Fountain Lane, as it's just been mentioned. I've had meetings with officers and I have mentioned that the Maidstone Borough Council is opening for new bids for SIL at some point, and I just really want to re-emphasise, and I know that everyone on the call has heard this already, but I want to re-emphasise that when that process opens again, the plan for Fountain Lane has to be ready, and as the Highways Authority, I really expect to see a bid put towards the borough for that junction. So I just want to sort of emphasise that too, as we've got a cabinet member, we've got Haruna on there, that we do want to see a bid for Fountain Lane, and that plan has to be developed and drawn up. So that's sort of it's not really a question, more of a statement, but I think, you know, if we can keep that in people's minds and make sure that that happens, that will be very welcome. So that's the only point I really wanted to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cannon. I couldn't agree more. Unless anyone else has indicated, we're going to finish with Councillor Sams.
Thank you. Without wishing to prolong it and get us all looking at our watches anymore, I've heard the comment, we are where we are. But let's face it, the last meeting was a complete shambles, and I was ashamed to be a councillor on this committee of the way we treated our residents. And I've tried to write to residents the best I can to acknowledge that. The views of the residents wasn't taken into account, and now they don't have confidence in who we're blaming in the process. I do strongly feel that given what we knew at the last JTB, KCC councillors, decision makers and officers could have assisted an emergency JTB meeting, and residents could have spoken and had some redress and ability to talk to this committee. Basically, I'm just really, you know, I know that we're upbeat tonight and we've got officers here, which is great, but I really feel quite negative about the committee, and I feel others do too. And I do wonder, having been on this committee for a good long time, as to what it's worth and where it's going. So I'd just like to leave it at that and apologise to residents for what happened.
Thank you, Councillor Sams. The only thing I'd probably add to that is, as we go forward, and if the JTB changes into something else, I hope that all of the existing board members' views will be welcomed into that process so that we can look at how they work better in the future. Thank you. So that item 13 was for noting. So can I agree that that's been noted? Thank you. Our final item on the agenda for this evening is item 16, and it's the Maidstone Highways Works Programme. And Susan Laporte, thank you for hanging on again. And would you introduce this for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and the board. This is an information paper, so there is no introduction. I'll obviously take any questions on it as per usual. So if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Thanks very much. I've got Councillor Ash.
Thank you. Telephone conversation, I today found out what concrete rehabilitation is. And it was quite a good explanation. Whether the residents of a certain road invested will accept it, I don't know. But even the person at the other end, I think more a secretary admin type person, she's never heard of concrete rehabilitation. But I do know what it stands for now. On page 143, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down, Church Road, Deeringwood Drive, Wellington Street, Spot Lane. You've just got it under Bearsted. It's not really, it's Downswood and Autumn as well. But in the second to last and the last columns, the description of the works, somebody's typed in all the wrong stuff. If whatever should be there could be sent through, it would be handy. It said current issues, and then all we've got is a series of MAO 00 whatever, and description of the works. It just tells you the roads. So if that could be sent through, correct, please. Thank you.
Susan, did you get that?
Yep. Okay, I've made a note of that, and I do apologise for that. I think it's moved along in printing actually. There is an explanation there, so I'll make sure that's amended. I do apologise for that.
Thank you.
Lovely, thank you. I've got Councillor Chittenden next.
Good evening, Sue. It's just a quick one, page 142, casualty reduction measures. It came through today and it's on here. The A229 running horse turbo roundabout. Other than the fact I was interested to see what a turbo roundabout was, I suppose I could have looked it up. But it says here the scheme has been reprogrammed to the 2024-25 fiscal year due to the lack of road space availability. Well, I don't quite understand what that means, Sue, because if it's lack of road space availability now, what's going to change in a year's time?
Well,
I just wonder if
yes, sorry, carry on.
No, carry on.
So yeah, it has been changed. At the moment, it's penciled in for May next year. It's anticipated the scheme will take about 6 weeks to complete. So because it is such a long extended scheme to such a busy area, there were a lot of other things that needed to be done in advance of that scheme going ahead. The road space is obviously something that we have to book in advance. There were a couple of issues relating to it, electricity feeder boxes, that type of thing, that didn't go ahead. So it delayed this going ahead. So all I can do is apologise. It is penciled in for May next year. It's in the Streetworks programme now. So all I can say that it's going ahead. If you need me to explain to you what the turbo roundabout is, I'll do that and come and speak to you and bring you some drawings if that help. Ian.
So just coming back, if you've got pre-works to do, I assume that if we're aiming for sort of May-ish next year, that those pre-works are already being planned and in hand.
Absolutely.
So that we don't get a delay again.
Yes, absolutely. They are.
Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you. Is the turbo roundabout where the left-hand side just carries on whizzing round? I think it, probably wrong. And I've got Councillor Clark to finish.
Hi, Sue. Just a quick question on page 150 about the viaduct. Is that work, do you working in coordination with Historic England, given it's a listed monument? It's grade 2, I think, isn't it, that viaduct?
You are right, Ian. Sorry, Brian. And our schemes people have been in contact with the conservation teams, and they've been speaking to each other. The majority of the work's been done. As you know, it was quite extensive damage, but the dates for the full repairs haven't yet been given, but they are imminent. But yes, they have been in contact with the conservation teams at both parties.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. I haven't got anyone else indicating, so I move that the Highways Works programme be noted. Is that agreed? Lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. I now declare this meeting closed.